Good evening, everyone. I'm Darius from Slag concentration plant. I'm going to introduce to you about the operations of Slag concentration plant. I'll first introduce to you some words, then later on we'll proceed with the process. We've got 22 keywords, and the first one is copper slag. This is simply any form of slag which we can treat to recover some concentrate. And we've got, that's about 4 types of slags. We have natural cooling slag, we have converter slag, we have reduction furnace slag, and we've also got the electric furnace slag. So all those are called the copper slags. Move on to number 2, that is the slow cooling slag. Slow cooling slag is the electric furnace slag, which is let to cool in the copper ladles. It is let to cool slowly in the copper ladles, and that helps in the recovery of copper when it comes to flotation process. Then we move on to natural cooling slag. This is the form of slag which they pour at the dump site. That one is let to cool quickly as it is poured. Then the other one we have now, the converter slag. Converter slag, as the name implies, it comes from the converters. It's got a slightly higher percentage compared to electric furnace slag and the reduction furnace slag. We move on to number 5, that is a crusher. As the name implies, to crush is to break something by impact. Number 6, grinding. Grinding is a process of now breaking down the slag that has been crushed into fine particles, into very fine particles. And usually this is attained using the SAG or the ball mills to make it finer in preparation for it to be processed using the flotation process. Number 7, we move on to SAG. So SAG, yes, semi-autogenous grinder. What this simply means is that grinding in the SAG is not done by the steel balls alone, but even the slag itself helps in crushing, in grinding, since it's big enough. So it's different from the ball mill. The ball mill only uses the steel balls alone to break down the slag. Okay, we move on to, that's mill number 1, mill number 2. These grind the material using the steel balls alone. Then we move on to number 10, cyclone. It's simply to separate the fine particles after grinding, to separate the fine particles from the coarse particles. Then we move on to number 11, quick flotation. This one, I can say, at our school, we never learned about this. I only found it at CCS because mostly you find that most flotations, they start with rough flotation. But here we start with the quick flotation. The concentrate which is collected from quick flotation is collected as the final concentrate. That's the difference with the rougher flotation. The rougher flotation, the percentage of copper in the concentrate is low. We move on to scavenger flotation. To scavenge is to pick something from the waste material. The concentrate which is gotten from the scavengers has got a lower percentage because they just try to pick from the waste material now. That also can't be treated as the final concentrate. It has to undergo through some other flotation processes to increase the concentration or the grade. Then we move on to cleaner flotation. The concentrate which is collected from the roughers, that is number 12, goes to the cleaner flotation cells. And we've got 6 cleaner flotation cells which are able to clean now the concentrate from the roughers to increase the grade, and then final concentrate comes out of the cleaner flotations. Then number 15, grinding mesh. We can also say the particle size, because for us to recover the concentrate from the slag, it has to reach a certain degree of fineness. And according to our standard, it has to be about 90% passing the 200 mesh. 200 mesh is same as this size. If we can grind to this size, then flotation will be easier for us. Then we move on to number 16, pulp. It's simply a mixture of fine slag, very fine slag, and water. So it forms a thick liquid, which is called the pulp. We move on to 17, flotation reagents. We've got 2 types which we are using at our concentrator there. We've got what we call the frothers, and then we've got the collectors. So for collectors, we are using 2 kinds. Isopropyl ethyl thiocarbamate, it's one of them. Then the other one we are using is sodium butyl xanthate. So we use isopropyl ethyl thiocarbamate at the starting of the flotation process. Then at the scavengers, we are using sodium butyl xanthate. What collectors do is, I'm just giving an example. If this is a fine particle containing copper, then the collectors comes around and attaches to it, to the surface of it. They will make it to become hydrophobic or to hate water, in short. So it will separate itself from the water to start to go to the top of the flotation. Then the other kind of flotation reagent we are using is frother. So function of the frother is simply to form bubbles. The copper concentrate that has been attached with the collectors will attach to the bubbles and float together. Number 18, slag ore. Starting raw material for the flotation process, then it becomes a slag ore. Then slag concentrate. This is the concentrate which is recovered from the slag. Then slag tailings. These are the tailings that comes out of the flotation process after floating the slag. The tailings, that's the waste product. Then we move on to 21, thickener. So the thickener, I can say, it's a huge vessel with a large surface area at the bottom. This is where the concentrate is pumped after it has been made at the flotation process. Then it is allowed to settle at the bottom and the water overflows out of the thickener. Then the concentrate now contains less moisture at the bottom. When it goes to the thickener, what we are trying to do is now to remove the water from the final concentrate. Then in number 22, filter. The filter, the concentrate from the thickener, from the bottom of the thickener, is pumped to the filters for further water reduction. And after water has been reduced by the filters, it falls to the storage shed. Number 23, dehydration. Dehydration is simply a combination of thickener and the filters. These two processes of removing water from the concentrate are collectively known as a dehydration process. So concentration department is made up of 3 major plants. These are slag flotation or slag concentration, then a cobalt plant, then we also have the coal crusher. At the slag flotation process, that's where the process of crushing, grinding, flotation, dewatering, and the final concentrate is produced. Cobalt plant, we won't talk much about the cobalt plant because now it's not working. So then the coal crusher, that one is just used to reduce the size of the coal, which is used by the anode furnace. A slag concentration plant treats slag from smelter to produce the concentrate. This process makes it possible for copper recovery, which would have been wasted. Slow cooling slag compared to the natural cooling slag, it's easy to process because it favors the formation of copper sulfide. So copper sulfide can easily be floated, and unlike the natural cooling slag, which has got a lot of this copper oxide, yes, copper oxide is very difficult to float. So slow cooling process is a very good process when you want to recover the copper. So we simply look at the processes involved during the copper concentration process. So the process starts with a crushing, goes on to grinding. Then from grinding, it has to go through screening. Screening is done by the cyclone. Screening is simply the separation of fine particles from the coarse. It's the same. From there, we do the flotation of the fine particles. Then from flotation, we make the final concentrate and it goes to dewatering. Then from dewatering to drying. From drying to transportation to the smelter. So this is simply a layout of how the processes are done. This is the crusher section. So after crushing, the size of particles are reduced to somewhere less than 160 millimeters, and from there those slag particles are sent into the SAG mill or the SAG for grinding now. Then after grinding in the SAG, the pulp which is produced is sent into the cyclones for separation of fine from coarse. So the fine from SAG is about 70 to 75 minus 0.074 millimeters, or 74 times 10 to the power negative 6. Yeah, like this one. That's the size which is produced by the SAG mill, or after separation in the first set of cyclones. Then the overflow from the first set of cyclones goes into ball mill number 1 for further grinding. Then after grinding in the ball mill number 1, the product goes back to the first set of cyclones. So here it's like a cycle. A cycle is formed until the material is fine enough, then it proceeds to the next stage. So the next stage, these are another set of cyclones which are smaller than the first ones. Then again here the cyclones does the separation. Then the fine particles proceeds now to the quick flotation. So the fine particles which are produced by the second set of cyclones is about 90% passing negative 0.074 millimeters, or passing 7.4 times 10 to the power negative 6 meters. Then the overflow proceeds to the number 2 ball mill for further grinding. Then after grinding in number 2 ball mill, the product goes back to the second set of cyclones, and the fine particles again proceeds. So again here it forms like a cycle. So we move on now from the quick flotation. So from the quick flotation takes place and the concentrate is recovered. So as I said earlier on, the quick flotation produces final concentrate. The concentrate which is produced here, this is final concentrate. Then the underflow from quick flotation goes into the rougher flotation cells. The rougher flotation cells, the concentrate which is produced here has got a lesser percentage of copper, so it has to undergo through the cleaner flotation cells in order to produce the final concentrate. Then the underflow from the rougher flotation cells goes into a set of 2 scavenger flotation cells. So as I said earlier on, the percentage here is very low. So the concentrate produced here has to go back to the rougher flotation cells for further cleaning. Then the underflow from the first set of scavengers goes into another set of scavengers, which are 3 in total. And again, the concentrate which is produced has got a lower percentage, so it has to go back to the rougher flotation cells as well. Then the underflow from the scavenger number 2 has got a lesser percentage of copper, maybe less than 0.25. So these are regarded as tails, and they are pumped outside to the tailings dam. Then we go to the cleaners. So from the rougher, the concentrate produced by the roughers goes through the cleaners. So we've got cleaner number 1, then the overflow from cleaner number 1 goes to cleaner number 2. The overflow from cleaner number 2 goes to cleaner number 3, and the concentrate produced by cleaner number 3 is also final concentrate. So we've got 2 sets of final concentrate, one coming from the quick flotation and the other one coming from the cleaner set number 3. So this is the final concentrate, and it goes to the dewatering section, to the thickener. This is at the crusher section. So this is the apron feeder. Then underneath there is a jaw crusher. Then from the jaw crusher we've got a conveyor belt number 1, which transports now the slag to the 2 storage bins. This is simply depicting the working process of a jaw crusher. So the jaw crusher has got a fixed jaw and a moving jaw. So this is the slag coming, and as it comes here, it is hit by the moving jaw and broken down, then it goes down. This is simply showing the process of crushing at the crushing section. Then we move on to the grinding section. So the grinding section comprises of the vibration feeders, which feeds the slag onto conveyor belt number 3, which further feeds the slag into the sag mill. So this is simply according to the chart I showed you earlier on. We'll just be repeating if we go through this one, so we can just skip this one. So this is a picture depicting how grinding is done either in the ball mill or in the sag mill. So what happens? Is a mixture of slag particles and also some steel balls. So as the ball mill is rotating, or the SAG, the slag and the steel balls are lifted up, and after reaching a certain height they have to fall down. And when they fall down, at the bottom here, the slag which is found here will be grinded, and the process continues. So by the time the process ends, the slag is fine enough. This is simply a picture depicting a cyclone a cyclone which is used for separating the fine from the coarse. The fine particles goes through the top, which is called the overflow. Then the coarse particles goes under the bottom, which is called the underflow. So the cyclones, their function is to separate the coarse from the fine particles. Yeah, that's simply the function of the cyclones. Then the flotation reagents, we've already talked about them in the acronyms. So we've got the collectors and the frothers. Then in flotation cells, we've got the quick flotation, the roughers, scavengers, cleaners. We've already talked about these also. So this is simply a picture depicting a flotation machine. So it's got an agitator or a steer at the bottom. Then also air is pumped at the bottom. So it will be mixing, and as it is mixing, the copper-bearing minerals will begin to float together with the bubbles and form a layer at the top, which is called the concentrate. Then the rest of the material at the bottom is called the underflow, or it can be called the tailings if it's from the scavengers. Again, this picture is simply depicting the arrangement of the flotation cells. This picture is simply showing the relationship between recovery and concentrate grade. So if we wanted to increase the grade very much, we wanted to increase the grade maybe to 40%, then what will happen to recovery is that the recovery will begin to reduce. So which means if the recovery reduces, which means we are going to lose more copper to the tailings. And if we wanted to increase the recovery maybe to closer to 100%, then what will happen is that if we interpolate at the bottom, the grade will become very low. So we have to work in between. We have to find the line where we can work in between so that both the recovery and the copper grade are satisfied. Okay, so dewatering is simply same as dehydration. What happens is the concentrate goes to the thickener first for water reduction, then from the thickeners it is pumped to the filters for further water reduction, and the final concentrate is produced. I'd put this graph simply to depict just for some days how the tailings are faring. Okay, these are the copper grades. Then this is the recovery. Recovery, you can see the bottommost is slightly below 82%. Then the highest most slightly above 90%. So which means the recovery is okay. It's part of the cobalt plant, but I don't think we have to do much on it because it's not working. This is simply a picture showing the actual flotation cell in the process. This is a picture depicting the magnetic separator which we were using at the cobalt plant. Ends the presentation. Thank you very much. That's quite a challenge, but if you've come to our section, we've got a small shelter, then the other shelter is just open. Yes, so what we do is first of all we have to put it in that small shelter, then it will be dried some by the air. At least the moisture content will reduce. Then from there we take it outside, cover it with tents, then we can put in some more wet concentrate to dry with air. Recycling the iron, because of the price of the iron, I think maybe you can run at a loss considering the percentage of iron. One of the suggestions would be adding more flotation cells that can try to help to reduce. So from the scavengers, maybe we can add some more to reduce some more. Yes, that can be one of the suggestions. Okay.